All right. Welcome back, everybody. And I hope it's a welcome back. Andrew Morgan here with the folks from SaaS Alerts. And gosh, Jim, what are we in, like week 12 or
something
more?
like that? I gotta go back and look, but it's getting up there, man.
I know it's flying. I see there's 28. It's slowly creeping up. And I'm wondering if because we had homework, might have been a deterrent. Hopefully it's not, but it keeps creeping up here.
You scared everybody off, Andrew.
I know, Chip. It's a bummer, but no, hopefully for those that are here, I think it's going to be an awesome session. I'm excited about it. Just real quick agenda. I'm going to call on you to see if there's any updates, anything you want to discuss. There may not be anything from a product side. Ryan, anything on customer success that you may want to talk about side. Again, no pressure on either of you. And if there's not, we'll jump into our session today. And that's going to be on Challenger, specifically around insight and what makes you unique, and how it maps specifically to what you do. Both Jim and I did our homework, and we're going to be exemplars. We didn't want to say do this and not do it. So we both did it. But then we'll open it up. You can critique ours as much as Jim has time for, and then you can rip mine apart. But more importantly, I'm hoping we can start to work on your stuff. Chip, to you first. Anything new and exciting? Anything you want to share? Doesn't even have to be new or exciting. It just could be anything you want to share.
Nothing major on the product update front. There have been a couple of releases since our call last week. They've been mostly bug fixes and minor things. We've got a lot of big, what we call epic projects moving in the background, and we'll have announcements about those in the coming weeks.
Awesome. And Chip, I'm excited that today's the 8th, about 3 weeks, you're going to be on with the former head of identity and access management from HP, who's now the field CISO for Netrix. So we're going to be doing an awesome fireside chat webinar on that, on initial access, and then how a threat actor traverses a network. So I'm really excited, and thank you for doing that. I think it's going to be a really good thing, and we'll get out there and start promoting that.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, awesome. Ryan, anything on your front?
Nothing super crazy. We've been fortunate the last couple of weeks to get to go to a couple of shows and meet a bunch of you guys or see you. So that was awesome. And I'm not quite sure if it's the SASE calls or meeting, or if it's all of Alex and Connor's hard work, but a lot of growth is in this incumbent group right here. Not new customers, that we're doing great there too, but we're seeing a lot of you guys add a lot more seats and start getting that messaging out. So not sure where to attribute that to, but very glad you guys are seeing it that way and leveraging the tool properly.
Cool. Awesome, Ryan. Jim, in interest of time, let me come over to you.
Yeah.
And start off. Again, I created that document. I hope everybody got a chance to look at it. Throw in chat if you haven't. I think Michelle could maybe point to it in the URL. But really what I wanted to do was start to really get into get less about ethereal type things, Jim, but really now pen to paper, because if we aren't able to provide an insight to our customer, and we'll start with one that is truly unique to us, that makes us unique, that then maps back to what we do, the customer is relegated to price. Right? I hate to say it, but wouldn't you as a consumer, Jim, if you can't differentiate, but you need whatever it is, if they're the same, right? What are you gonna buy?
Exactly.
So, yeah. And the last thing I'll say, Jim, as I hand it to you and talk about your insight and how it maps uniquely to your solution, is I don't think there's ever been really a better time for MSPs. It was one thing when we just were doing IT services, but there's so much specialization and unique things that we can do in security that provide us that additional oomph, if you will, that we didn't have previously. So
no question about it. And that's going to be one of the insights the insight that I end up sharing.
Oh, okay. Awesome. And I didn't even know that. So let me let
Yeah.
you talk, Jim.
So it's actually something I've talked about before in terms of what the insight is, but I put it in different contexts. So last week I asked folks if they would be interested in us putting together a webinar, essentially a generic webinar that MSPs can use to explain SaaS security monitoring to their customers, right? So what I did was, in preparation for this meeting, my homework, I basically put together a draft of what something could look like. And what I also was thinking about was, the average MSP's end user company or customer doesn't necessarily understand from a technical standpoint how all of this stuff really works and comes together. So what I wanted to do in this is set up the insight with context from an analogy perspective. So, and I really would love to I'm going to fly through this a lot quicker than I would if I was presenting it to a group, but you'll get the gist, because what I really want at the end of this, Andrew, is some feedback on, is this something that people, if we put into a finished format, if this is something that people would want and use. So in terms of context, put yourself in a situation where you're now presenting this deck, right, to your customers and maybe prospects. It could be a webinar that you're doing, a lunch and learn, maybe it's even a one-on-one meeting with a really large customer or prospect. But we'll, essentially the topic here is SaaS applications, the next threat vector. And start by asking, how many of you in the audience here use credit cards? Okay, we know the answer. Everyone's going to raise their hand because everyone uses credit cards. Okay, so Mr. and Mrs. Customer, what I want to do here is explain. I have all the notes that I want to put in there. I'm not going to share with you guys now, but I put it in there so all of you can ultimately present this the way you want as well, just highlighting the main points. But think about credit cards. At some point in time, credit card companies started incurring a lot of fraud fees. There's a lot of people out there that were essentially committing fraud against others and essentially getting away with crime associated with stealing credit cards and using other people's credit cards to buy stuff, right? And credit card companies come to realize that, look, realistically, the average consumer is not going to stare at their credit card transactions online 24/7, 365. They barely do it once a week. Most do it once a month. So what credit card companies did was they created an alerting mechanism. So now, right, it happens to me all the time when my son buys DoorDash, right? I get an alert on my phone that tells me that someone just used my credit card, right? And then I can report suspicious activity. So that's, from a monitoring perspective, credit card companies felt like they need to put this in place to protect themselves and their customers. Well, 365 throws off a ton of events, right? And they kind of act like credit card transactions. So there's just a lot more of them. And most of them are completely innocuous. They don't really mean anything. But us as the MSP, to you, our job is to go through those logs, those events, and make sure we understand the ones that are critical and then respond on your behalf. Okay, that's why SaaS security monitoring and monitoring SaaS applications is so important. And a great example would be 365. So what if I told you, coming back to the credit card example, that you could only retain your credit card transactions for 30 days? So Andrew, you bought something in for Christmas. You can't go back now and look at that transaction, right? Because it's past 30 days. So I would be in trouble because I do my expense reports usually like 30 to 40 days after, right? So I couldn't do that anymore. But That's what Microsoft is doing right now with your 365 events, right? They work similar to credit cards in that there's all these logs and activity, but at the end of the day, the default for 365 retained data is 30 days. That's it. That's all you get. But just like credit card statements, it's important to be able to go back in time to look in case we need to follow up on something for forensics or analysis purposes. So, and then how many, there's a reason why, and why do literally millions of people use a service like LifeLock? And that is ultimately to protect, online credit card and bank account information. So the same type of care needs to be given to protecting SaaS application account data and information, right? Because ultimately, if they gain access to that information, it's a bad thing, just like it's bad if someone's gaining access to your credit card and bank account information. So what are cyber criminals doing with all of this information that they're trying to collect? Okay, they're going to go through a social engineering exercise, which leads to essentially the types of crimes that they want to perpetrate on companies like yourself, right? So a lot of people talk about ransomware, and rightfully so, it's a big problem. But what most people don't realize, Mr. and Mrs. Customer, is that actually business email compromise actually is a way bigger issue and costs companies a lot more money. Just since 2021, right? There's been about 3,800 victims of ransomware for about $50 million in loss, compared to almost 20,000 victims of business email compromise, totaling 2.4 billion. Again, that's just since 2021. So this is a huge issue, and Microsoft has come to understand this huge issue, right? Here's the commercial insight. Last year, they changed their terms of use. Okay, so they've always protected themselves from being liable, but now they've taken the extra step because they understand all this is happening, and they are now putting the onus on you and me, Mr. and Mrs. Customer. Now they're saying, look, anyone that gains any third party that gains unlawful access to a Microsoft tenant, they can be held liable. You, the customer, can be held liable. So this is a really big deal. It just came out. It's something that we want to make you aware of. And ultimately, that is our job. Our job is to help you understand and mitigate your risk. And we do that by deploying people, process, and technology. And our goal is to educate you, our customer, prospect, and ultimately then protect you. So our 5-step program consists of the following as it relates back to some of the things we talked about, right? So alerting in real time on your most important SaaS applications, just like credit card companies develop technology to do that. We've now done this for you around your most important SaaS applications like 365. Response. This is really important. So we've also configured technology to do automated response to the most critical and timely alerts within your SaaS applications. Experts. We have experts on our team that are dedicated technologists, and what they do is they analyze key data points, okay, to make sure that everything is the way it should be and nothing isn't as it should be. Retain. So, we like we talked about with the 30-day retention on credit card stuff, which is no good. Same thing goes for Microsoft 365. So we're going to give you year retention on your SaaS data for analysis and forensic purposes. And then lastly, part of our solution makes sure that we are coming in and reviewing this information with you on a consistent basis, discussing these important alerts and metrics. So this is something that ultimately we need to make you aware of. You need to understand your risk. You need to know that Microsoft, changed the rules recently, and ultimately want to put that information in your hands. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Andrew.
Jim, I thought it was awesome. Really, really, really well done, man. And in a very short period of time. I think I gave you this homework assignment last night.
You did. I did it on the plane on the way down here.
So really good stuff. Anybody want to come on and just, or comment and, what did you think? It's not about, it could not, obviously not about stroking Jim's ego, or it could be picking it apart. But what I just want to point out is, did you understand, right, the insights? Did you know every single insight he provided? And did you see how it mapped directly to his solution? So any comments? Anybody want to chime in? And Andy.
I got a question. Would it make sense to offer an analysis of their cloud instance and a way for them to get metrics back to say, this is happening today as a value add to the webinar?
100%. Definitely.
So,
I mean,
that would be a good call to action, I would suggest.
no, yep. And that just wasn't part of the homework.
Okay.
It was just to provide, commercial insight and then build something around it. But I totally agree. Like, what we can do, and this is a draft, by the way, and I see some folks asking for the deck, which we're happy. So that answers part of my question. Would this be valuable to some people in terms
Yes.
of wanting it, right? So that answers that. Then I'll work with Michelle to actually take it out of draft form and put something that's a lot more presentable. Like, I'm not, Michelle is our marketing manager and she's our graphic person, and she would die if something like that went out. I'm just like cutting and pasting crap. So now that we know that this is something you want, we can actually put something more professional together. And then you can put whatever call to action you want.
And or white label it for our particular organizations.
100%. Like we'll strip all SaaS alerts out. And what you should be talking about ultimately is not SaaS alerts. You shouldn't be talking about SaaS. You're talking about SaaS security monitoring. And this is the CEO of SaaS alerts telling you this, right? Like, if I'm putting my old MSP hat back on, what I'm saying is, like, don't talk about the actual specific product. Talk about what you're doing for the customer and how you're helping them. Because, when I was at Thrive Networks, MSP, I never let anyone know what we used.
Yeah.
So,
Jim, I'm glad you really said that, because again, we don't want to relegate ourselves back to being VARs. Exactly. Because if we're talking about a product, I can get it from anybody.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So I'm a big proponent of white label everything. We will give you guys a generic version of this. I would also offer, if some people want, I can record a version of it when it's completely done and white labeled, and I will not identify myself. And if folks want to leverage the recording of it without me identifying myself at all, just, hey, folks, we're here to talk about SaaS security monitoring and walk through it. Happy to do that as well.
It kind of reminds me, Jim, you could kind of be in like a hoodie, and we could have you kind of like as a clone your voice and be like kind of a, one of these individuals that, is on a secret, not to be known type. But yeah. No, it's awesome.
I would I wouldn't even come on camera. I would literally just record it.
Yeah.
Just to walk through the ideas and the concepts. But first of all, does that make sense? Like the credit card stuff in terms of being able to boil this down, the average end user company?
It was fantastic. Yeah. Anybody else want to comment? And while you raise your hand or say yes, you would, or again, just my hope for this exercise is think about your company, right? And the work that you have to do to think about what makes you unique, right? Because at the end of the day, Jim was like, okay, this is our unique value prop here. This is the thing that we do uniquely, and that maps back to our solution that others don't. So, Wes, hey, good to see you.
Hey, I really did like the credit card example. It made it accessible. And also when you're talking to the C-level, you're talking to a CFO, you're talking about a CEO, most of the time that's where their brain is anyways.
Right.
And then the part about where you dived into the fact of fraud with the credit card immediately triggered me to think of security. And that level of alerting is sometimes the only thing that separates us from, a boom or not. So I think it was a really good way of framing the service.
Okay, cool. Love the feedback, Wes. Thank you.
That's great.
So now that we get some of this feedback, what I want to be able to do is work with Michelle to make this something that is truly sales enablement for everybody, right? So you can feel confident doing this yourselves. I'll put all the notes in, from a concept perspective. You can present it lunch and learns, you can present it, just in a plain webinar, whatever, like I said before. So we want to help you guys certainly relay this information on to your customers. And I believe, coming back to one of Andrew's points in terms of distinguishing yourself, I believe there are very few MSPs out there that actually do a good job distilling this information down, this technical information down, in the way that people can actually understand it. Like the average, and your average customer, when they hear SaaS security monitoring, they probably have no idea how it works, right? Or what the hell it is. So
Probably don't care because they care about their business.
exactly, right? So that is so, and then no one ever looks at the terms of use from Microsoft, even though they're signing off on it, right? So the fact that you've done that homework and you now know about that and you're giving that insight to them, I think is huge. And then to Andrew's point again, coming back to how this, relates to what you can do for them in the 5-step program on how you tackle it for them, I think could actually be pretty beneficial. But that's just me.
Fantastic, Jim. Fantastic. How are you on time? I know it's 1:25.
Yeah, I'm losing my quiet spot because you're coming in and setting up in this room now. So I think I'm gonna have to get going here. But Andrew, I appreciate, actually, even though it was last minute, I had to do the plane down here. I appreciate you giving the assignment. And I'll go back and listen to the recording of this call later to hear how everybody else did.
Awesome.
Okay.
Great, Jim.
Thanks,
For
everybody.
doing that. Really appreciate it. Best of
Okay.
success on your talk.
Thanks. We'll see everybody. Bye.
Hey, Jim.
All right.
So
Really,
Andrew, are
nice.
you next?
I'm next, unless you'd like to be.
No, I think you're next.
Okay, Chip. You're after, huh? No. Okay, so let me share out my screen. Now, Jim, man, he really one-upped me because I didn't do a nice PowerPoint like he did. But hopefully, as I walk through this, the similar genre will appear. Okay. So I don't know if you guys know or not, but let me just kind of set the stage. I founded Write a Boom. I host the Cyber Call, Cybercast, and some other things. And so think of my customer, my prospect as you guys, right? MSPs, MSSPs. For this particular scenario, for this particular role play, right? So our research has found that over 70% of MSPs have not implemented security controls and or policies that are either mapped to CIS Implementation Group 1, Center for Internet Security, or an equivalent framework. And further, over 75% of MSPs do not have an incident response plan that has been simulated or stress tested. This lack of preparation directly impacts the MSP's ability to sell the proper security offerings at the right price. Hence, margins and overall sales lag significantly to their peers who have put in the work. Last part of my insight, and I'll tell you where the research comes from and the data. This lack of security maturity not only places the MSPs themselves at risk, but knowing they have C2, command and control via RMM, via their RMM solutions to all their clients, an exponential risk can be posed. Compound this with MSAs that are weak in defensibility, along with claims that we do it all on their websites and literature. The 2021 period proved to be a period of exposure that to the MSP business, to the exposure that MSP businesses that some did not recover from. So let me just pause there and see if you guys have any comments or questions. Happy to share. Also, I'll share up front. Michelle, maybe you can see if there's any hands raised or anything, but those stats actually come from the cyber call where we have just about 6,000 MSPs and MSSPs that are part of the community, where those are the MSPs, by the way, that are security focused. So these are not your average MSP even. These are MSPs that are highly focused on building security maturity. So let me pause there for a second. Questions, comments?
Yes, I have a question.
Sure.
In the research that you mentioned or that you did you find any information on how many MSPs are doing, for example, a SOC 2 reporting or something like that? Because the controls that you mentioned that were missing, wouldn't they pop out in those reports?
Depends on what the SOC 2 is specifically, what they're focused on in the SOC 2, what the scope of the SOC 2 is. But let's assume, yes, that SOC 2 was looking at these controls, it would, but in terms of the number of MSPs, percent of MSPs that do SOC 2, you're probably talking at best 4-5% that have SOC 2.
Oh, wow, that's very low. Yeah, okay. Okay.
It's very low, real low.
All right.
Yeah. Who's asking? I'm trying to
Oh,
see.
I'm sorry. This is Nico Kluwer from Navistart. I'm in the Caribbean.
Oh, wow. Whereabouts in the Caribbean?
I cover a few islands. I'm currently in Curacao. I cover Aruba, Bonaire, just the best islands, St. Martin, and also a little bit of Suriname.
Oh, my long-term girlfriend is a Bayesian. So
okay. Yeah.
So awesome. Other comments on the insight piece or questions? No? Okay. Anybody have any like skepticism of the numbers? I'm curious.
No, another question from me.
Yeah.
And this may be sensitive for people that are computing in the same jurisdiction or same area, but would it be an idea if to put like a group together that shares information like on best practices, etc., on these I think good items that you mentioned for procedures and controls, etc., that are typically missing?
We got it's a great idea. We have a very strong relationship with Center for Internet Security, and actually peer groups is something we're diligently working on with them. So, and again, it's interesting, I think MSPs that are mature and a lot of, which I think this group is, there's competition. Honestly, the real competition, Nico, is the insight here. Not doing it, not your counterpart out there. If that makes sense.
I agree with you. I agree. I totally agree with you.
All right. So No, go ahead, please, please. Oh, all right. So map to my solution. So if you're not familiar, you can go Google writeaboom.com. It's a security conference that we felt compelled to build a conference that provided a complete journey for MSPs to look through the lens of a real threat actor. So what we do literally is we look at each time we do the conference, a real threat actor. I'm not going to give away who this one is because it's in less than 2 weeks. But this is arguably the most innovative threat actor to date that does target MSP and SMB as well as other industries. But we look through the lens of a real threat actor to understand their tactics, techniques, and procedures, commonly known in MITRE attack verbiage as TTPs, and how MSPs can build capability to not only defend themselves and clients from attacks, but again, we're in business to make money. So, each session is not only looking at, the technical side of this, right? But then how do we build defenses and capabilities that we can take to market and profit from by building a threat-informed security program that's highly differentiated from the competition. We bring in many of the nation's top security practitioners to teach both technical skills and business, but go-to-market strategies to build a profitable, successful business. So that is our unique value proposition relative to other conferences out there. So again, comments, questions on any piece of it, insight or the solution? No? Okay.
So I'll comment, Andrew. I think it's very well done, very well put together, and a good example of providing the background information and that how it maps to the difference you're going to make for your customer. And that's the point of the exercise, I think.
Yeah, and I'd love the honest feedback from some of you out there. If you're bold enough to do it. When I did this insight, if you were one of these, don't have implementation group one, haven't stress tested your incident response plan, etc., did it rub you a little bit? Did it piss you off a little bit? Because I'm hoping it did, not like got you angry at me and like this son of a bitch, but like the whole point of commercial insights are to build friction that the status quo isn't good, because we don't move a buyer if the status quo is acceptable.
And Andrew, I don't think that the challenge is not understanding what needs to be done. It's getting the resources allocated to it and completing them.
I'm sorry, who's, I'm looking through the chat.
Oh, sorry, Andrew, this is Eric.
Hey, Eric, what's going on?
How are you?
Good, buddy. Looking forward to seeing you. Look, there's no question, right, that, Nat, and this would get into, let's just say, a role play sales conversation that I'd empathize with you, right, Eric? There's no question that many MSPs struggle with resource constraints, blah, 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 blah. Right? But here's our examples of MSPs that are doing it, right? So granted, right, but we have MSPs that are doing it. It's like Gary Pica, right? When he talks about, I could never sell at $250 a seat, now $350 a seat, right? No one could do that in my area of the country. And yet there are MSPs just down the road that are doing it.
Yeah, good point.
I have a thought on that as well. Eric pointed out, bandwidth issues, of course, but whenever we're trying to develop a strategy, it has to germinate from somewhere. You got to have that seed of it. And when you were going through your insights, that's what kind of clicked with me. We all have best of intentions, but until we put some motivation and resources behind it, we're never going to get anywhere. So the fact that we need to get like CIS Group 1, is a good first step, and then from there can expand into further controls. So
No, Wes, you nailed it. It's just get started. Don't let great be the enemy of good. We talk about a lot on the cyber call, and again, I'll use a Gary Pica. I said this at Schnizzfest. We had the cyber call live there. We had the senior director, well, now she's VP, Phyllis Lee from CIS. And I used a Garyism because I've known him for 2 years, which is you can't give somebody something you don't have. And he originally used it in sales, right? Because business owners notoriously want to go hire a salesperson to fix their sales issues. And if they've never done it themselves successfully, sold MRR successfully, then they can't give somebody something they don't have. That was the analogy he would draw. Well, there's never been a truer analogy for security. When you look at the MSPs that are selling in the 250, 300, and you look at their internal security programs and what they're doing internally, there is a direct correlation, because they have to be able to, and I shouldn't say they have that command to go into a conversation around it. And if it's business owner led, they can talk about the resources and energy, and I get it, and it's challenging, right? So all businesses struggle, right, with prioritization, building market share, revenue, employees, etc. But innovation without innovation, that's where competition eats your lunch. So, see what Ryan's quote about Mike Tyson. I always love Mike. And Mike. Yeah, of course they do. Yeah, one of the greatest quotes ever. Okay, did anybody do any of the homework? Did anybody start with an insight? Anyone? And if you didn't, does anybody want to come on and talk about what one could be, something that you feel you guys do unique? You don't have to give away your secret sauce, right? I get that, but you can kind of talk around it. Anybody? Michelle, is anybody raising their hand? Oh, I love it, Wes. Yeah. Go. Let's see you in a few weeks, right?
Yeah. I'm going to come down.
Can't wait.
So I brought up and that's kind of what led to that. The cyber defense matrix is something that we're trying to, it made a lot of sense to me, my team. It allowed us to be able to compartmentalize the different solutions and kind of where they're at, where the overlays are. And we always talk to our clients about security and layers, but they don't understand exactly where those layers are overlapping or what they're doing for them. And I've had many clients who have had a MDR solution for, over a year. Renewal comes up and they would ask me a question like, well, we still get a lot of spam, so why are we renewing this? And it's like, well, no, that's the wrong thing. So by actively educating them using that tool, using that framework, it allows us to be able to, one, have an opportunity to sell a new solution that they may not be taking advantage of. But two, it also allows the client to accept the risk of what they're not buying. And so if they, for example, don't have any kind of data protection, and there's no solution to that, they can't look to me and say, well, I thought you all were doing that. No, no, we're not. We had a conversation, and it was clearly marked out here in black and white where these things kind of come together. Hopefully we don't get into those kind of conversations, but mostly it's more of educating the C-level so that they have the ability to make an informed decision about their environment, about their business.
I love it, Wes. So let's go with where you could maybe use this in combination with Jim. So maybe say like, hey, here's a commercial insight. And by the way, I am just winging this off the fly. Now, Wes brought up Sunil Yu, who's the keynote speaker at Right of Boom. And this is his cyber defense matrix. Sunil was the former chief security scientist at Bank of America. Now he's the CISO at Jupiter One, and arguably one of the, he's been written as one of the foremost thought leaders globally in security. So just to give you a nice sense of who Wes is speaking about. And so Wes, maybe one of your things is, it could be the commercial insight is like, hey, most organizations are completely blind when it comes to things that are in the cloud. You can maybe harken back, like some data research has showed since the pandemic, workloads and office productivity has shifted, where you do all of your business and all your most important data and applications that run your business, Mr. Customer, which is X, Y, or Z business. And you told me revenue is dependent on 80% of your revenue is dependent on this app. They're blind. 90% of companies are blind to any, so you get the point of how you could turn that into a commercial insight, Wes?
Yeah, I think that, and not only that, but when you were going through that, it kind of also opens up the door to do a data flow diagram for the client and really kind of say, how are you using your data? And to your point, everybody's remote, or perhaps everybody's in their org. They don't have a single office, everything behind a firewall, but they are still managing data and it's moving between multiple people, but they have no idea, how and why and what exposure they have there. So,
yeah, it just like I said, this is the legacy view of the world, right? Mr. Customer, this may not mean a lot to you, but the legacy view is everything is behind your doors, right? That's how we used to think about things. But let me ask you a question. Have you moved things into the cloud? Sure. Remember, we did this, and your QuickBooks Online's there, and your whatever is in the, right? So I love where you're going with it. And this is a way you could build an insight around it and show them the lack of that, X amount of business owners are blind, right? To blah, 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 blah. You're not alone. So excellent stuff, Wes. Okay. Others.
So Andrew, while we're waiting for others, I'll just follow on with Wes's comments and yours. And Microsoft has a great white paper out there. If you guys Google the Microsoft Fast Study post-COVID working environment, it talks to this point, that we're moving beyond the traditional network. The best employee isn't necessarily in the office anymore. And it's a great icebreaker that you can bring across to clients to help them understand why SaaS security monitoring has become so important. The underlying thesis that SaaS Alerts has as a business, and this is one that you guys can develop into an insight yourselves, is that, hey, we've always done for you, Mr. or Mrs. Client, all of this security stuff around your local network and your devices. And now, because of a general trend that was accelerated by COVID, you've got workers coming in from all over the place that are no longer protected when they're offsite, when they're not in that environment. And here's a new way we want to bring to you to help protect them, to track that account behavior at what it's doing with your corporate data, and give you keen insights into exactly how the accounts are being used and your knowledge workers are sharing information. So that becomes, a 1-2 punch backed up by Microsoft's own internal documentation that gives you guys sort of a wide open invitation to revisit the topic with all of your existing clients, and certainly visit it anew with prospects.
Good stuff. Chip, what's it called?
It's a Microsoft Fast Study. It's called Post-COVID Working Environment.
I'm just taking a quick note. One of the analogies that I just thought about that, Jim did such a great analogy with credit cards. It's almost like, and I heard this the other day, one of an MSP does basically versions or model years, Chip. So Mr. Customer, how a customer's like, well, I thought you were doing it all for me, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, Mr. Customer, you're still on the 2019 model, right? Since the pandemic, the amount of things that we've had to do because of, again, you don't have to give them perimeter and identity because they're not going to get it. But I'm talking to you all because you would understand those terminology. But right, because so much has shifted, right? It's like you're on an Etzel, right? You're on this old car, right? Or, you don't have a catalytic converter, or you don't have seatbelts that are mandatory, whatever. The threat landscape has changed. How we work has changed. And therefore the stack, right? And what we do is different than 2019. So I don't know if that makes sense, Chip.
Makes a ton of sense. And it's even more than that. The threat landscape is always changing.
Yeah.
It hasn't, there's this sense of security that I think a lot we had as security professionals that we passed on to our customers through, the middle 2000s that, hey, if you put a firewall in and you do all these basics, you have anti-malware on, and then, endpoint detection and response, that's enough. Well, hackers don't sit still. Like they've figured out already that all those defenses are in place. And guess what? They've also figured out that it's a lot easier to just take over an account that's sitting in the cloud and then go wreak havoc there. They don't need to be inside the corporate perimeter anymore. The perimeter is the entire universe of the internet, and that they have to work with. So bringing that.
Oh, sorry. No, please.
Yeah. So it's just a new opportunity to bring that across to the customer and help them realize this isn't going to stop. Like every time the security community responds to what's going on or gets ahead of what's going on with the bad actor community or the hacker community, they're going to change tactics. So we're going to have to come back and have this discussion every year. It doesn't go away.
If not sooner, but reason I'm chuckling is, by and large, right, we know identity and credential-based attacks are the number one. If you look at the aggregate, Chip, right, and go, certainly for SMB, right? Interestingly, to your point, Mandiant just put out new data, and it's now Google, right? And my good friend Steve Carter, who owns Nucleus Security, which they play way up market. Well, what are enterprises doing? Because they obviously know creds are where it's at, right? They're putting in vast amounts of security around credentials and and single sign-on and passwordless and on and on and on. And not that they're invincible in that area, but the point is this: last year was the first time attacks on external and internal vulnerabilities by threat actors bypass creds at the enterprise level as the main source of attack for initial access. So just to your point, the biggest of big are obviously getting good at creds and initial and identity for initial access. So what does the threat actor do? Innovates.
Exactly.
So really interesting stuff, Chet. Okay, we got 10 minutes left. Does anyone want to kind of throw something out that they would want us to help work on for your commercial insight? Anything that we could be doing to help further your commercial insight? And yeah, just show of hands, are you going to work on this? I hope, for your sake. Awesome. Good. All right. So, Chip, question on the upcoming stuff that you've got planned, product wise, big, will we start to, talk to the the community about what's coming and things like that, and get their insights and thought, or they're not their insights, but their thoughts on what you guys are doing probably in the next few months and so.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like I said at the outset, we've been working on some major new thrusts that we're really not announcing publicly, but 2022 was a big year. Since we have a little gap time here, we can cover some thoughts on it. We actually more than doubled the size of the SaaS Alerts code base, and I know that doesn't necessarily mean anything to everybody in the call because it doesn't translate into functionality itself. But we'll be doing that again in 2023 and adding additional feature sets that are, I think, as valuable and important and sort of earth moving as Respond was. Respond was a really big deal. The ability to have SaaS alerts take remediation steps on behalf of the MSP. We're going to make it much easier for the MSPs to correlate new information from sources that we aren't tracking today. I'll just leave it at that, and let your imaginations run wild. But it's a pretty big expansion of where we're going product wise. A lot of that comes from feedback from this group since when was this first SaaS meeting? Back in September. So we're way past 12, by the way, I think, in terms of where we're, our count. Some of it was stuff that we already had in the roadmap, and the feedback that we get from the collective energy of this call and our partners who participate has definitely guided some of the choices that we were making. So it's going to be a few more weeks. It's going to be, toward the end of the quarter when we start pulling back the covers a little bit. I don't want to pull an Elon Musk here and announce a Cybertruck in 2018 and it's still 2023 and everybody's waiting for it. So,
Great analogy.
We're going to wait until we have a really firm idea on target dates.
Good stuff, Chip. Well, we certainly can give people back 6-7 minutes of their life. We don't have to stand here and just fill time. I know we're all busy. Any closing comments or thoughts? And again, anything we can help you with? Yeah.
I got something.
Yeah, right.
I thought that this might have come up, but it didn't, so I figured I'd chime in. I feel like somewhat the low-hanging fruit here is the whole AI space right now about ChatGPTs now making it very easy to make conversational generated content be very convincing. And so like business email compromise we used to be able to kind of rely on, misspellings or incorrect language as an easy way to identify things. Now it's going to be a lot harder to identify those things. So having other layers of protections like SaaS alerts to see who's accessing your mailboxes, what it's doing in your mailboxes is going to become much more valuable because it's going to be harder for us to use the traditional approaches.
That's a great insight, Ryan.
That is a great insight. I was going to say the exact same thing. It's brilliant.
Because it used to be behind a paywall, right? And now Microsoft just released in an Edge browser with ChatGPT built into it that has a compose feature for making posts and things like that. So this is going to be immediately available to any threat actor in any language because it can run any language. And so it's very good at stringing words together and making it very convincing. So if you have, and they can, if I had access to say someone's mailbox and there's an email thread, I could just copy and paste the entire email thread, put it in a ChatGPT and say, write me a response in the simulating this person, and have the direct conversation, and it'll put it into the context of how they're talking to each other. Like that is like a significant divergence from what we could have done prior.
It's an excellent point, Ryan. And not this Monday, but the following Monday, the gentleman I talked about, Steve Carter, is going to be on the cyber call. We're not only going to be talking about that very subject you brought up around ChatGPT for those types of things. However, we are also going to talk about how ChatGPT is being used by threat actors to use and explore vulnerabilities in code bases. So not only can they use it in that way and look for vulnerabilities, but we can conversely look for vulnerabilities. So he's going to be going through that piece of where he sees it going, both good and bad.
Interesting, because like what I'm concerned about is somewhat a slightly opposite approach about the AI assisted programming tools are inherently creating more security vulnerabilities in their software. So I find that like it's more the risk of AI assisted tools for programming, I feel, is more of a threat in creating insecure code rather than utilizing it to analyze for vulnerabilities.
But you get my point, how they're gonna use it.
Yeah, exactly. But I think the challenge is it's more, I think it's it's more of an opportunity problem where, more programmers are being asked to do more things in a variety of ways. And so they're having to be lean and quick with how they program. And, these AI tools don't put security first in their context, and
Yeah.
they don't necessarily like a GitHub, for example, prevents you from putting any AI assisted code in their platform currently because of that, because they're so concerned about the security ramifications with this that it makes the code look like it's possible, and it's harder to identify where these bugs are because it's doing such a good job of stringing things together to look plausible that you really have to analyze the whole darn thing to figure out where did it come up with something that is completely incorrect.
Right.
It's still plausible. Yeah.
Yeah. Good stuff. Really good, really good stuff, Ron. Way to close us out. Anybody else? Too funny, Ben. All right. I don't think it will, Ben. Not you. Looking forward to seeing you in a few weeks as well.
Now I got to read Ben's comment.
It's pretty funny. All right. Michelle, are we good? And we'll wrap things up here at 2 minutes before.
Yes, I have the message. I'll be working on that presentation with Jim. Need to get it from him. So I did put the link to our LinkedIn Sassy group in the chat if you want to join it. I drop things in there a lot. It's easier than trying to capture everyone's email addresses on here. It's a little trickier. If you don't want to be in the community and you do want a copy of that presentation, then you can shoot me an email. It's just michelle@saasalerts.com.
Awesome. Thanks, Michelle.
Sure.
Chip, awesome. Thank you for commenting. And all of you, thanks for tuning in. We'll look forward to seeing you next Thursday. Take care.
Great stuff, Andy. See you next week.
Thanks, guys.